Power is not given. It is recognized. And if you live your life waiting for people to respect you, you will die waiting. Respect is not a gift, it is a force you emanate. And the moment you understand this, your relationship to the world changes forever. Disrespect is a silent poison. It seeps into your mind long after the moment has passed. A single word, a dismissive laugh, a subtle look of condescension. These things linger, replaying in the theater of your memory, growing heavier each time. And yet, some people walk through life untouched by it. It's not that they are never insulted, but that disrespect cannot cling to them. Why is that? Why do some people seem immune, while others are haunted by even the smallest slight? Why can two people walk into the same room, one overlooked, the other commanding presence, without saying a word? Nietzsche believed the answer lies not in fighting for respect, but in becoming the kind of person for whom disrespect loses its meaning. He wrote that the noble soul has reverence for itself. This is not arrogance, not swagger, not performance. It is an inner gravity, a weight that cannot be pushed aside. And here is the promise. By the time we are done here, you will see how Nietzsche's method, when fused with the insights of psychology and lived experience, can transform you into someone who is never truly disrespected again. Not because people suddenly become kinder, but because their contempt loses its power over you. Stay with me until the end, because the shift you are about to encounter is not a trick, not a tactic, but a way of being. And if you're drawn to these explorations of philosophy made practical, subscribe now, not as a formality, but as a choice to step into a space where thinkers like Nietzsche, Jung, and Marcus Aurelius become allies in the art of living with dignity. Now let us step into the heart of the problem, why disrespect wounds us so deeply, and why Nietzsche believed the cure must begin within. Disrespect is never just about words. It is about power. Every slight, every dismissal, every careless act of contempt is a small reminder of where the world believes you stand. It is the subtle reinforcement of hierarchy, a signal that says, you are lower, you are less, you are not to be taken seriously. Think of the last time someone spoke over you in conversation. It may have seemed small, perhaps they didn't even notice. But what did you feel in your body? A tightening of the chest, a heat in the face, a sudden silence as if you were erased. That moment is not only about the words that weren't heard. It is about the identity you were denied. Psychology gives us a language for this. Our brains are social instruments, tuned to scan constantly for cues of inclusion or exclusion. Neuroscientists call it social pain, and they've shown that the same neural pathways light up during rejection as during physical injury. This is why disrespect hurts more than we admit. The brain interprets it as a threat to survival. Evolutionarily, being ignored or humiliated once meant banishment from the tribe, which was death. Even today, in our modern world, your nervous system reacts to a smirk or a scoff with the same panic it once reserved for predators. Nietzsche knew this before neuroscience confirmed it. He understood that beneath the surface of culture lies the raw struggle for recognition. The one who commands respect survives with dignity. The one who is disrespected is condemned to live as if in shadow. But here lies the twist. Nietzsche warns us that those who hunger for respect most desperately are often those least capable of commanding it. The very craving itself is a sign of weakness, a confession of dependence on others. And so begins the vicious cycle. The more you long for respect, the more fragile you become. The more fragile you are, the easier you are to disrespect. The more you are disrespected, the more you long for respect. Around and around the spiral goes, until your entire identity revolves around how others see you. Philosophers and psychologists alike have recognized this trap. The American sociologist Charles Horton Cooley described the looking-glass self, the idea that we construct our sense of identity by imagining how others perceive us. We become mirrors of mirrors, never truly ourselves, but only reflections of reflections. Disrespect, in this light, is not just an insult, it is an attack on the very image of who we believe we are. And yet, the most painful form of disrespect is not what others give us. It is what we give ourselves. How many times have you silenced your own voice before anyone else could silence it for you? How many times have you walked away from an opportunity, telling yourself you weren't ready, you weren't worthy, you weren't enough? This is self-disrespect, the quiet poison that seeps into your thoughts, shaping your posture, your tone, your very presence. Before anyone else has dismissed you, you have already dismissed yourself. And when you carry that inward diminishment, the world simply mirrors it back. Nietzsche captures this brutally when he writes, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." In other words, even self-contempt contains a perverse dignity. It acknowledges at least that you are capable of judgment. But the one who collapses completely, who cannot summon even the will to despise, is lost. This is the soul that begs endlessly for recognition, a soul that has surrendered sovereignty. Have you noticed this in your own life? That the more you crave someone's respect, the less likely you are to receive it? That the people who move through the world with quiet assurance, who seem not to need approval, are often the ones who command it most naturally? This is the heart of the problem Nietzsche forces us to face. Respect is not something you can chase without destroying it. To crave it is to signal that you don't already have it, and people, consciously or not, sense this. Like animals who smell weakness, they test boundaries, they push, they dismiss. It is not always malicious. Sometimes it is simply instinct. But it teaches you the same painful lesson. Respect cannot be begged. It can only be embodied. So here we stand at the first crossroads. On one side is the path most people take, endless strategies, tricks, and performances to win respect, all of which only deepen their dependence on it. On the other side is the path Nietzsche offers, a radical transformation of the self, in which respect is no longer a fragile prize to be won, but an inevitability that flows from the way you inhabit your life. The question is, how do you walk that path? To answer this, Nietzsche gives us one of his most powerful metaphors, the metamorphoses of the spirit. The camel, the lion, the child. 3 stages of transformation, each one stripping away a layer of weakness and preparing you for a new form of strength. This is not theory, it is a map. And it is in these transformations that the method to never be disrespected again begins to take shape. But before we walk that road, pause with this question. Where do you see yourself right now? Do you carry the burdens of the camel, bowing under expectations? Do you roar like the lion, endlessly fighting for space? Or have you glimpsed, even briefly, the child's freedom, the lightness of someone who no longer needs others to validate their dignity? Hold that thought, because the next step in our journey is to enter Nietzsche's metamorphosis itself, and see how each stage teaches us a way to transmute disrespect into strength. Nietzsche did not believe in shortcuts. To him, becoming someone who could never truly be disrespected was not about tricks, tactics, or learning how to clap back at insults. It was about a metamorphosis of the soul itself. He described this as the 3 transformations, first the camel, then the lion, and finally the child. Each stage is both a trial and a liberation. Each reveals something essential about respect, why we lose it, how we fight for it, and ultimately how we transcend it. Let us begin with the camel. The camel is the beast of burden. It kneels willingly to be loaded with weight. It says yes to every demand, every expectation, every authority. It bears responsibility without protest. And on the surface, this looks noble. The camel is hard-working, dependable, enduring. It accepts what others give it and carries on. But Nietzsche saw in the camel a hidden tragedy. The camel accepts too much. It says yes not from strength, but from fear. It bows not out of reverence, but out of habit. The camel lives for others, parents, bosses, society, even God, but never for itself. And so it becomes a creature weighed down by duties that are not truly its own. How does this look in your life? Maybe you've been the person who says yes to every request at work because you fear rejection if you say no. Maybe you've accepted disrespect in relationships, quietly carrying the weight of insults, because speaking up feels too risky. Maybe you've bowed under cultural or family expectations, afraid that refusal would mean exile. This is the camel posture, endless submission, endless endurance, endless self-disrespect disguised as responsibility. And here's the paradox. Camels often look respectable. They appear dutiful, moral, selfless. But deep down, others do not respect them. They are pitied, used, sometimes admired, but not truly reverenced. Because respect cannot be given to one who has abandoned their own sovereignty. Nietzsche insists that the camel must transform. But into what? Into the lion. The lion is a creature of defiance. Where the camel says yes to every demand, the lion learns to say no. The lion discovers its own power to resist, to carve boundaries, to reject false masters. The lion growls at the dragon Nietzsche describes, the dragon with scales that gleam with the words, "Thou shalt." This dragon is every voice of authority that says you must obey, you must conform, you must sacrifice your dignity for the approval of others. The lion's task is to slay this dragon with a simple, terrifying word, no. Psychologically, this stage is crucial. People who live too long as camels eventually awaken to their resentment. They feel the bitterness of years wasted in submission, and they roar. They stop tolerating disrespect. They demand recognition. They push back. This is empowering and often necessary. Saying no for the first time can feel like breathing after years underwater. But the lion, too, is incomplete. For the lion lives in opposition. Its strength is defined by what it resists. It fights for space, but does not yet know how to create from freedom. And while others may respect the lion's ferocity, they often fear it more than they revere it. You can feel this in people who live their lives in constant defiance, always angry, always reactive, always needing something to resist in order to feel powerful. The lion cannot be disrespected easily, but it is still trapped. Its dignity depends on the presence of an enemy. And so Nietzsche tells us the lion must give way to the final transformation, the child. The child is innocence, but not naivety. The child is the spirit of play, of creativity, of freedom. The child no longer bows like the camel, nor roars like the lion. The child simply is. It creates without asking permission, it lives without resentment, it says yes to life itself. This is what Nietzsche calls the spirit of affirmation. And here lies the secret. The child does not need respect, because it embodies something deeper, self-reverence. When you reach this stage, disrespect has no power over you. Someone can mock you, ignore you, belittle you, and it cannot pierce you, because you no longer measure yourself against them. Your life has become its own creation, and in that creation, dignity is untouchable. Think of artists who create not for applause, but because they must. Think of philosophers who pursue truth even when mocked by the crowd. Think of children at play, utterly absorbed in their own world, immune to the judgments of passers-by. This is the child's power, to live with such authenticity and joy that respect becomes a byproduct, not a pursuit. Have you noticed this in your own experience? That when you stop craving approval, when you begin to live from your own source, others suddenly begin to take you seriously. That when you are no longer desperate to be respected, respect begins to arrive unbidden. This is the paradox Nietzsche offers. The one who least needs respect is the one who commands it most. The metamorphosis, then, is a journey from submission to defiance to creation, from camel to lion to child, and each stage teaches us a lesson about disrespect. The camel teaches us why it happens. We invite it through our endless submission. The lion teaches us how to resist it, by asserting our power to say no. But only the child shows us how to transcend it altogether, by living in such a way that disrespect simply loses its meaning. This is Nietzsche's method in its purest form. But before we can embody it, we must understand the psychological machinery that makes it work. Because philosophy without psychology can remain abstract. To truly live it, we must see how the mind interprets respect and disrespect, how people project their insecurities onto us, and how our own unconscious shapes the way others treat us. So let us turn now from Nietzsche's metaphors to the psychology of respect itself, the hidden forces that govern recognition, and how you can reshape them from the inside out. Respect is not just a cultural idea. It is hardwired into the human nervous system. To understand why Nietzsche's method works, we need to look beneath the surface, into the psychology that governs how people perceive one another, and how we perceive ourselves. Imagine two people walking into a room. One immediately draws attention. The other fades into the background. Neither has spoken. Neither has moved dramatically. What happened? Your brain, like everyone else's, is running an ancient program. It is scanning for signals of strength, submission, and belonging. Neuroscientists call this dominance detection. Without conscious thought, we notice posture, tone of voice, eye contact, rhythm of movement. These microsignals tell us whether someone should be listened to or ignored, respected or dismissed. Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 processing helps us here. Respect is largely a System 1 decision, fast, intuitive, unconscious. You don't deliberate on whether someone deserves respect. You feel it instantly. Only later do you rationalize your response. That means all the arguments, all the explanations, all the attempts to convince people to respect you are fighting a battle that was already lost in the first 2 seconds. Respect isn't reasoned into existence. It is sensed. This is why Nietzsche's insistence on self-reverence is so profound. When you truly revere yourself, your body carries it. Your tone changes, your silences deepen, your movements slow down. You radiate calm instead of fidgeting for approval. And others pick this up unconsciously. They feel it before they understand it. They may not even like you, but they will respect you. But psychology reveals something deeper. Disrespect often has less to do with you than with the other person. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. When people disrespect you, often they are projecting their own shadow onto you. They see in you what they cannot accept in themselves: weakness, failure, ambition, difference. Their disrespect is a mirror, reflecting not your flaws, but their own hidden fears. Think of the bully at school who mocked the quiet kid. Was the quiet kid truly inferior, or was the bully projecting his own terror of being overlooked? Think of the colleague who constantly interrupts. Are they truly superior, or are they compensating for their insecurity about being irrelevant? Disrespect, in this sense, often says more about the disrespecter than the disrespected. And yet, here is where it becomes dangerous. If you carry unresolved self-disrespect, these projections find a place to land. Someone mocks you, and you think maybe they're right. Someone ignores you, and you shrink further. The shadow of others fuses with your own. This is why Nietzsche's method demands transformation. Unless you transmute your inner stance, disrespect will always have a hook in you. Psychologists Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary developed what's called the need to belong theory. They showed that humans have a deep, almost biological need for recognition and inclusion. Without it, we suffer not just emotionally but physically. Chronic disrespect is linked to higher stress, weaker immunity, even shorter lifespans. That means this is not a luxury. Learning how to exist beyond the reach of disrespect is not just a matter of pride. It is survival. But survival alone is not enough. Nietzsche pushes us beyond survival into sovereignty. He would say, yes, the human being craves belonging. Yes, the psyche is vulnerable to rejection. But the higher task is to transform this dependency into strength. To revere yourself so deeply that you no longer live at the mercy of others' projections. Consider how this works in practice. If you embody the camel posture, submissive, over-accommodating, others unconsciously place you lower in the hierarchy. They interrupt you, dismiss you, not always from malice, but from instinct. If you embody the lion posture, defiant, reactive, you command space, but through fear. People respect your roar, but secretly they wait for you to exhaust yourself. But when you embody the child posture, creative, authentic, playful, something different happens. Others sense that you are untouchable, not because you fight for dominance, but because you no longer play the game at all. And psychology confirms this. Studies on charisma, for example, show that the most magnetic individuals are not those who dominate conversations or constantly assert themselves, but those who radiate self-assurance and freedom. They don't crave your approval, and that very independence makes you give it to them. This is Nietzsche's child, the spirit of play that no longer needs to prove itself. But let us not be naive. Even if you embody this transformation, disrespect will not vanish from the world. There will always be people projecting, dismissing, mocking. The difference is that it will no longer wound you in the same way. Like an arrow shot into stone, their disrespect will break against your presence. And here lies the key. Modern psychology tells us we cannot control how others treat us, but we can control how we interpret their treatment. Nietzsche goes further. If you transform yourself, you won't just interpret disrespect differently. You will alter the field around you so profoundly that others sense, at a primal level, that you are not to be diminished. So the psychological foundation is clear. Respect is about signals. Disrespect is about projection. And the self is the filter through which all of it is experienced. The weaker the self, the more disrespect wounds. The stronger the self, the more disrespect dissolves. But this raises a deeper question. Psychology can explain the mechanisms, but it cannot fully tell us how to live differently. For that, we turn back to philosophy. Because while psychology shows us the how, philosophy shows us the why. And if we are to become immune to disrespect, not through tricks, but through transformation, we need to see how thinkers across history wrestled with the dignity of the self. So let us now widen the circle. Nietzsche's method is powerful, but he was not alone in pointing us towards self-reverence. Marcus Aurelius spoke of it, Socrates embodied it, Kierkegaard agonized over it. Each adds a dimension to the picture of what it means to live in such a way that respect is inevitable and disrespect powerless. Nietzsche gives us the metamorphosis, camel, lion, child. But he is not the only thinker to recognize that dignity, self-respect, and inner sovereignty are the true antidotes to disrespect. Across centuries and cultures, philosophers have returned to this theme, each adding a different lens through which to see it. If we are to understand Nietzsche's method fully, we must hear these voices alongside him. Let us begin with Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. Marcus ruled the most powerful empire of his time, yet his private writings, his meditations, are filled with reminders to himself about dignity, restraint, and inner calm. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the Stoic answer to disrespect. It is not what happens to you, but how you choose to interpret it that determines your dignity. Marcus faced slander, betrayal, even rebellion within his own ranks. As emperor, he could have silenced dissent through force. Instead, he often reminded himself that the opinions of others were beyond his control. If someone disrespected him, that act revealed their character, not his. His task was not to win their approval, but to maintain self-command. Here we see an echo of Nietzsche's child, the ability to remain free of resentment, to affirm one's own being regardless of the crowd. Now turn to Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher of existential despair. Kierkegaard wrestled with the terror of individuality. He argued that most people live as part of the crowd, dissolving their identity into public opinion. But for Kierkegaard, the crowd is always untruth. True respect, both for oneself and from others, can only arise when an individual dares to stand alone. To be oneself fully and authentically is the highest act of courage. This is precisely why disrespect wounds us. It tempts us back into conformity. When mocked or diminished, the instinct is to retreat into the safety of the crowd, to silence our individuality for the comfort of belonging. Kierkegaard would warn us that this is the death of the self. Better to endure disrespect as an authentic individual than to win cheap approval by erasing your uniqueness. In this sense, Kierkegaard sharpens Nietzsche's challenge. The goal is not simply to transcend disrespect, but to use it as a crucible for individuality. And then there is Socrates. Of all the figures in philosophy, Socrates might be the most powerful example of dignity in the face of contempt. He was mocked in the marketplace, accused in the courts, and ultimately condemned to death for corrupting the youth of Athens. Yet in every trial, Socrates refused to beg for respect. He did not flatter the jury. He did not water down his truth. He accepted death rather than compromise his philosophy. What do we see in Socrates? A man who, like Nietzsche's child, lived from a place of innocence and creation. He did not fight disrespect with aggression, nor submit to it with silence. He met it with a kind of playful seriousness, turning every insult into a question, every accusation into an opportunity for dialogue. His dignity was untouchable because it was rooted not in public opinion, but in truth. This is what it means to be immune to disrespect, not because the world refrains from attacking you, but because you no longer give it the power to wound. Carl Jung offers us yet another angle. Jung believed that respect and disrespect often hinge on the shadow, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves. He warned that if we do not integrate our shadow, we will project it outward, seeing our own weaknesses in others. This means that much of the disrespect you encounter may not even be about you. It may be someone else's shadow spilling onto you. But here's the twist. The shadow you deny in yourself will also determine how others treat you. If you have disowned your anger, others may trample your boundaries. If you have disowned your confidence, others may treat you as small. Jung would say, integrate your shadow. Own the parts of yourself you fear. In doing so, you radiate wholeness. And that wholeness is felt by others as respect-worthiness. When we place these thinkers together, Marcus Aurelius, Kierkegaard, Socrates, Jung, we begin to see a pattern. Respect is not secured by force or performance. It is secured by alignment. Marcus teaches us to master our interpretation. Kierkegaard teaches us to dare individuality. Socrates teaches us to live by truth, not approval. Jung teaches us to integrate our whole self. And Nietzsche ties it together with the metamorphosis, camel, lion, child. The message is clear. The way to never be disrespected again is not to control others, but to become so aligned with your own dignity that disrespect loses its weight. But philosophy must become flesh. These ideas must enter stories, moments, and examples from the real world, or else they risk floating above us as abstractions. To feel the full force of Nietzsche's method, we need to see how these transformations look in human lives. Those who endured disrespect, those who resisted it, those who transcended it. So in the next part, let us turn to stories. Some ancient, some modern, some ordinary, some legendary. Stories of people who carried the camel's burden, who roared with the lion's defiance, and who, finally, lived with the child's creative innocence. Through them, we will see how Nietzsche's method is not merely theory, but a living possibility. The philosopher's words are powerful, but it is the lived life that gives them breath. Nietzsche gave us the metaphors of camel, lion, and child, but what do these look like in real people, in history, in moments we can imagine? Let us step into the lives of a few figures and ordinary scenarios to see how this method unfolds in flesh and time. Begin with the camel. Picture a young man in his first job, desperate to please. He takes on every task asked of him, stays late without complaint, swallows his frustration when colleagues speak over him in meetings. Outwardly, he is praised as dependable, diligent, selfless. Inwardly, he begins to shrink. His back bends under invisible weight. The very qualities that win him polite approval also mark him as someone easy to dismiss. This is the camel's trap. Respect earned through self-sacrifice often curdles into quiet disrespect. Others sense he does not revere himself, and so they mirror it. Now imagine a turning point. One day he says no. Not with anger, not with elaborate explanation, but with simple firmness. A colleague tries to offload another task, and he replies, "No, I can't take that on right now." The air changes. For the first time, he feels the stirrings of the lion. This moment is small, but it is everything. The lion roars first and whispers. The lion stage is dramatic, and history is filled with examples. Think of Rosa Parks in 1955, sitting quietly on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. When told to give up her seat, she refused. She did not shout, she did not strike, but in her refusal there was a roar that shook the world. The disrespect of segregation pressed against her dignity, and she pushed back, not with violence, but with the unyielding strength of self-reverence. This is the lion, the refusal to be diminished, the breaking of chains. But Nietzsche warned, if we remain lions, we risk being consumed by struggle. The lion needs the child. So let us imagine a different figure, a poet, mocked in his time, called mad, dismissed as irrelevant. He does not fight his critics. He does not carry their words as wounds. He continues to write, to play with language, to create worlds from imagination. Decades later, his words inspire generations. This is the child, creating without bitterness, playing without fear, living without chains. We might see this spirit in someone like Socrates, who, even at his trial, joked with his accusers, playing with their arguments as though they were riddles. Or in someone like Nikola Tesla, who, despite being ridiculed for many of his ideas, continued inventing, dreaming, imagining, not to win approval, but because creation was his nature. And consider a modern story. A woman leaves a relationship in which her partner constantly belittled her. At first, she carries those insults inside her like scars. She doubts herself, shrinks in new conversations, hesitates to speak. But slowly, through therapy, solitude, and self-reflection, she begins to integrate her shadow. She allows herself to feel anger instead of burying it, to own her strength instead of denying it. One day, when someone interrupts her, she simply keeps speaking, not aggressively, not apologetically, but with quiet authority. The room falls silent. She realizes in that moment, she has become untouchable. Not because disrespect has vanished, but because it no longer defines her. Stories like these remind us that Nietzsche's method is not reserved for philosophers or revolutionaries. It is a path anyone can walk. The camel, lion, and child live within each of us. In moments of burden, in moments of defiance, in moments of creation, we see them surface. The challenge is to keep moving through them, not to be trapped in one stage. And there are darker stories too. History is littered with people who never escaped the camel's burden, who lived lives bent under others' expectations, never daring to roar. Others lived as lions forever, defiant, proud, but ultimately consumed by resentment and exhaustion. Few reach the child, the stage of playful innocence where respect is not demanded, but inevitable. Perhaps this is why Nietzsche saw the child as the culmination. Only here do we become free. So as you reflect, ask yourself, in your own life, where have you been the camel? Where have you been the lion? Have you ever tasted the freedom of the child, the freedom to live without needing others to recognize you? These stories prepare us for the final turn. Because philosophy and psychology give us theory, and stories give us examples. But the last question is practical. How do we live it? How do we embody Nietzsche's method today, in daily life, in moments of challenge, in the thousand small interactions where disrespect tries to creep in? That is where we now turn. To the lived practice of self-reverence, a more fatty and creative innocence. To the steps that transform these insights into presence. It is one thing to admire Nietzsche's vision, to nod at the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Kierkegaard, or Socrates. It is another to embody it in daily life. Because the question still lingers. How do you actually live in such a way that disrespect cannot touch you? Nietzsche's answer was never about tricks or surface tactics. It was always about transformation. To live his method, you must shift the axis of your life inward. You must become the kind of being for whom self-reverence is as natural as breath. Let us explore how. Begin with solitude. Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." Solitude is not withdrawal from life, but a return to yourself. When you spend time alone, not distracted, not numbed, but truly with yourself, you begin to see the ways you bend under others' expectations. You hear the echo of their voices in your mind. You notice how often your choices are really theirs. Solitude exposes these hidden chains. And once you see them, you can break them. Then comes shadow work in Jung's sense. To live Nietzsche's method, you must own the parts of yourself you fear. If you deny your anger, you will always be disrespected. Integrating the shadow does not mean acting out every impulse. It means refusing to exile parts of yourself. Anger, pride, desire, even fear, these are not enemies but energies. When you claim them, you stop broadcasting weakness. People sense wholeness in you, and they respect it, often without knowing why. Alongside shadow work is the practice Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of one's fate. Most people resist what happens to them. They complain about slights, replay insults, resent those who wrong them. But Nietzsche urges something radical. Don't just endure your fate, love it. Every insult becomes fuel. Every dismissal becomes proof that you are walking a path too singular to be universally accepted. When you love your fate, even disrespect is transmuted into strength. What could wound you now serves you. There is also the discipline of silence. The camel talks to justify itself. The lion shouts to demand recognition. The child, however, does not explain. Silence is not weakness. It is presence. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. When you pause before responding, people lean in. When you refuse to rush to defend yourself against disrespect, you reveal that you are not dependent on their validation. Silence is one of the most powerful ways to command respect without ever asking for it. But all of these practices, solitude, shadow work, a more fatty silence, are not ends in themselves. They are ways of cultivating the child. The child in Nietzsche's method is not naive. It is the stage of innocence regained, of play reborn after struggle. To live as the child is to create rather than react, to play rather than posture, to shine rather than prove. This is the most practical key. Disrespect loses power when your life becomes oriented around creation. If you are building, writing, inventing, teaching, making, if you are channeling your energy into creation rather than reaction, then disrespect becomes background noise. The child does not argue with critics. The child plays, builds castles in the sand, knowing that even if the tide washes them away, the act of creation was the point. So what does this mean for you practically? It means cultivating self-reverence daily. Notice when you bend too quickly to please. Notice when you roar only to be heard. Then ask, what would the child do here? How would innocence and creativity respond? Sometimes that means refusing a task. Sometimes it means laughing at an insult. Sometimes it means saying nothing at all. Above all, living Nietzsche's method means refusing to outsource your dignity. The crowd cannot give it to you, so the crowd cannot take it away. Respect becomes not a prize, but a radiance, something you emanate simply by being aligned with yourself. And when you live this way, something subtle happens. People begin to notice. They may not even know why, but they treat you differently. Conversations shift. Interruptions diminish. You are no longer easy prey for disrespect, because your presence itself makes it unthinkable. You have become the lighthouse in the storm, the stone against which arrows break. But the story does not end here. Living Nietzsche's method is not about becoming untouchable in the sense of being distant or cold. It is about becoming untouchable so you can finally be free, to play, to create, to love, to live without fear. The goal is not armor, but radiance. Not walls, but freedom. And this brings us to the conclusion, the transformational truth at the heart of it all. Respect is not given by others. It is grown within. Every slight, every dismissal, every insult you have carried was never proof of your smallness, but proof of the world's blindness. The only reason it wounded you was because you believed, even for a moment, that their eyes defined your worth. Nietzsche's method rips away that illusion. It teaches you to stand not as someone waiting for respect, but as someone who has already become unshakable. The camel taught you to recognize the weight of other people's demands. The lion taught you to rebel against it, to roar back when the world tries to bend you. But the child is the secret. To live playfully, creatively, innocently, this is to be free. And freedom is the deepest form of respect. For when you are free, others may insult you, but they cannot diminish you. They may dismiss you, but they cannot define you. They may disrespect you, but it cannot touch you, because you no longer outsource your dignity to their opinions. Here is the truth to carry forward. Disrespect only has power where you give it a home. Withdraw that permission, and suddenly the insults lose their sting. The laughter loses its echo. The shadow of others no longer darkens your life. You become, in Nietzsche's words, someone who has reverence for themselves. And when you live with reverence for yourself, the world cannot help but feel it too. So ask yourself as you leave this video, will you remain the camel, forever bent under the expectations of others? Will you remain the lion, roaring endlessly against the world's contempt? Or will you dare to become the child, to live so freely, so playfully, so authentically, that disrespect slides off you like water, leaving you untouched. If this reflection stirred something in you, if you feel the pull to live with more gravity, more freedom, more dignity, then this is the work we do here. Subscribe not as a transaction, but as a quiet declaration that you are ready to live beyond disrespect, ready to walk the path of Nietzsche, Jung, Marcus Aurelius, and all those who discovered that the deepest respect begins within. The final challenge is simple, but not easy. From this day forward, stop waiting for respect. Stop demanding it, stop pleading for it, stop performing for it. Instead, revere yourself. Walk as if dignity is the ground beneath your feet. And watch as the world, confused at first, slowly learns to mirror what you already know. You were never someone to be disrespected.